The Shattered Dream. The scent of gardenias and champagne hung in the air, a symphony of luxury and impending joy. I stood before the full-length mirror, my wedding gown a cascade of ivory silk and lace. It hugged my curves with a gentle authority, a testament to months of meticulous fittings. In my reflection, I saw the woman I was meant to be, radiant, confident, a bride on the precipice of her perfect fairy tale. This was it, the day I would marry Liam, the man who was everything to me, my anchor, my compass, my one true love. The man I had known since college, whose ambition matched my own, whose laughter was the soundtrack to my happiest memories. My phone buzzed on the vanity, a text from my sister, Sophia. "Almost there. Can't wait to see you, sis. The limo is on its way." A small smile touched my lips. Sophia was my world. We were inseparable, two halves of a whole. She was my maid of honor, my confidant, the one person who knew me better than anyone. Then, a knock on the door. It was the wedding planner, a flustered woman with a clipboard. "Miss Sterling, a delivery just arrived for you. It says it's from an anonymous donor." A strange chill ran down my spine, but I dismissed it as pre-wedding nerves. She handed me a small, unmarked black box. Inside, nestled on a bed of velvet, was a single USB drive. No note, no label, just a cold, dark piece of plastic. I plugged it into my laptop, my fingers trembling slightly. The file was simply titled Truth. As it opened, a video began to play. The scene was a hotel room, my hotel room, the one I had booked for Liam and me after the bachelor and bachelorette parties. And on the screen, there they were, Liam and Sophia, his arms around her, their faces too close, whispering words that were meant for me. I couldn't breathe. The sound of their muffled laughter, the gentle way he brushed her hair from her face, a lifetime of lies unraveled in a single gut-wrenching moment. My perfect fairy tale shattered into a million sharp, jagged pieces. Unzipped the dress, letting the silk and lace pool around my ankles. I stepped out of it as if it were a skin I no longer recognized. It lay on the floor, a shimmering white corpse of a dream that was never meant to be. The world outside my suite hummed with the joyful anticipation of a wedding that would never happen. I could hear the faint, cheerful strains of music, the excited chatter of arriving guests. My mother's laughter, bright and clear, echoed from the hallway. They were all there, 100 people who loved me, who were here to celebrate a lie. And in that moment, the raw, blinding agony of betrayal gave way to something else. A cold, hard resolve. I wouldn't let them have the satisfaction of seeing me break. I wouldn't give them the drama they deserved. I would not be the tragic heroine. I would be the architect of their ruin. My phone buzzed again. A text from Liam. "Baby, I'm here. Can't wait to see you." A bitter, humorless laugh escaped my lips. He was so oblivious, so consumed by his own arrogance that he couldn't possibly imagine the fire he had just lit. I didn't reply. Instead, I pulled on a pair of jeans and a simple t-shirt, the clothes of a woman who was no longer a bride, but a ghost. My first act was not one of rage, but of meticulous precision. I opened the contacts list on my phone. Liam, Sophia. I didn't delete them. That would be too dramatic, too final. I needed them close. I renamed their entries, not with insults, but with simple, cold labels. Project Annihilate, Target 1, and Project Annihilate, Target 2. The clinical titles gave me a strange sense of power. This was no longer a personal vendetta. It was a mission. I spent the next hour in a state of chilling calm, my mind a storm of calculations. I didn't feel the tears I should have been crying. I didn't feel the sobs that should have racked my body. The grief was a slow-burning ember, and the only fuel it needed was my own rage. My own company. "I'm looking for a new team," I explained. "The best and the brightest. Data analyst, tech specialist, a PR expert with a knack for crisis management, and for creating them." My voice was a monotone. "I'll be funding this myself. The project is top secret. Anyone who asks what it's for, the answer is a strategic buyout. No more details." The headhunter, sensing my seriousness, didn't pry. He simply promised to send me a list of candidates. As I hung up, I looked at myself in the mirror again. The woman who had been a bride an hour ago was gone. In a place was a strategist, a puppet master, a woman whose heart had been replaced with ice. The grief was a wound, yes, but it was also a weapon, and I was just beginning to learn how to use it. My revenge would not be loud and messy. It would be silent, precise, and utterly devastating. And they would never see it coming. My first call to Evelyn, my financial advisor, had been a test. A single thread I had pulled from the fabric of my old life. The ease with which she agreed to my secretive request confirmed what I already knew. Money, in the right hands, was the most effective weapon. Within 48 hours, the shell company, Vanguard Enterprises, was a legal reality. A phantom entity with a sizable operating budget that was, for all intents and purposes, a direct extension of my will. It existed to serve one purpose: to bleed Liam and Sophia dry, slowly and without a trace. My next step was to acquire the right tools, the right people. The headhunter sent me a list of impressive resumes, but I didn't want impressive. I wanted hungry, I wanted brilliant, and I wanted people who asked no questions. I scheduled interviews in a nondescript office building downtown, a space I had rented under a different name. The candidates walked in expecting a typical corporate job, but they were met with something else entirely. The first was Mark, a data analyst with a reputation for being a digital ghost. He could unearth buried information, trace digital footprints, and, most importantly, erase them. His public relations, both in building a narrative and, more importantly, in tearing one down. She had a network of contacts in every major news outlet, and a knack for planting seeds of doubt that would grow into full-blown scandals. "My last job was about exposing the truth," she said, a sly smile on her face. "What's this one about?" "This one is about crafting a new truth," I replied. "You'll be feeding strategic rumors into the market. Whispers about unstable leadership, shady business practices, and impending failures. Your job is to make people believe a story that is not entirely false, but is entirely destructive." Her smile widened. "I can do that," she said, her eyes gleaming with a kind of wicked delight. With my team assembled, the groundwork for my revenge was laid. I handed them my first and only targets: Liam's company, Aegis Innovations, and Sophia's fledgling design studio. I didn't give them my personal history or the names of the people they were targeting. To them, these were just assets to be dismantled. From the shadows, I became a puppet master, pulling the strings of my new enterprise. I watched as Mark's data began to pour in, spreadsheets detailing Liam's overextended credit lines, emails revealing his reckless spending habits, and an intricate web of his professional and personal relationships. I learned that he had been relying on a single, massive client for nearly 80% of his revenue, a glaring vulnerability. And Sarah, my PR guru, began her work with ruthless efficiency. She started with subtle, anonymous posts on industry forums and news websites, questioning Aegis's long-term stability and speculating on the future of its leadership. The whispers were faint at first, but they were there, and they were beginning to spread. I spent my days in a haze of spreadsheets, legal documents, and strategic planning. The grief was still there, a dull ache beneath the surface, but it was now a tool, a source of power. My anger had become a cold, calculating force. Not a direct attack, but a slow, quiet poisoning of the well. Mark started with tiny, almost imperceptible leaks, a rumor planted on a niche industry blog about a project delay at Aegis, an anonymous comment on a financial forum questioning Liam's latest quarterly projections. These were not direct accusations, just subtle whispers designed to create an undercurrent of doubt. I watched Liam's social media, and I saw the first signs of stress. He was posting less, and when he did, his updates felt strained, forced. He was used to everything being easy, to his success being a given. Now, for the first time, he was being challenged from a source he couldn't see or touch. He had no idea the questions he was now being asked by investors and partners were coming from me. Then Sarah took over. Her work was more artistic, more vicious. She used her contacts to get an interview with a mid-level manager who had recently been laid off from Aegis. The article, published in a respected online business magazine, was a masterpiece of half-truths. It didn't directly accuse Liam of mismanagement. Instead, it quoted the former employee, speaking on condition of anonymity, mentioning a culture of poor communication and overly ambitious deadlines that lead to internal friction. The language was careful, professional, and utterly damning. The effects were immediate. Liam had to go into damage control. He posted a carefully worded statement on his company's website, dismissing the claims as baseless and the words of a disgruntled ex-employee. But the seed of doubt was already planted. For weeks, I watched as Liam's perfect, pristine reputation began to show its first cracks. But the real pleasure came from watching their relationship unravel. My plan was to drive a wedge between them, to make them turn on each other. I knew that their betrayal of me was rooted in selfishness and a lack of moral fiber, not genuine love, and selfish people always look for someone to blame. One evening, I received a text from Sophia, her name still a cold label in my phone. "Chloe, have you talked to Liam? He's being impossible. He's so stressed about work, and he's taking it out on me." The irony was so rich it was almost poetic. She was complaining to me, the woman they had betrayed, about the very stress I was inflicting on him. I played the role of subtle manipulations continued. I knew Sophia's greatest insecurity was her lack of professional success compared to me and Liam. So I had my team anonymously create a fake online profile. A former colleague who would comment on her LinkedIn posts praising her underrated talent, but subtly mentioning how she never got the recognition she deserved. The comments were designed to feed her feelings of professional jealousy toward Liam, making her resent his success even more as she watched his company, her company, begin to falter. The final piece of the domino was an anonymous tip sent to Sterling Holden. It was a single, carefully edited financial report, highlighting a minor oversight in Aegis's internal accounting, a detail so small it would normally be ignored. But with all the whispers and rumors, it was enough to make a major client take notice. My phone rang. It was Liam. My heart hammered, not from fear, but from a thrilling anticipation. This was it. the first domino was about to fall. I let it ring once, then twice, before I answered, my voice a picture of calm concern. "Hello, Liam," I said, ready to play my part. This was no longer just about revenge. It was about power, and I had just tasted its first delicious drop. Liam's voice on the phone was strained. The easy arrogance I'd known for years replaced by a frantic edge. He didn't ask how I was. He just dove into his problems. "Chloe, you won't believe this," he said, his words tumbling out. "Sterling Holden just called. They're doing an internal audit on Aegis. Something about irregularities in our last quarterly report. It's ridiculous. I've gone over the numbers a dozen times. Everything is clean." I listened, letting a pause hang in the air for a moment. "That's awful, Liam. I'm so sorry," I said, my voice dripping with manufactured sympathy. I then offered him exactly what he needed, a scapegoat. "Do you think it could be a competitor?" I suggested, knowing full well opportunity, and went in for the kill, subtly stoking the flames of her self-doubt. "I get it," I replied, "but you know how men are. Sometimes they just need to feel like they're in control. He probably needs you to be his rock, even when he pushes you away." This was a masterful lie. Liam was a man who craved constant validation, not a quiet anchor. My advice was designed to make Sophia try harder, to smother him with emotional support, which would only drive him further away. I was encouraging her to be the person he didn't need, confirming his own feelings that she was no help at all. My strategy was working perfectly. I watched them from a distance, through the digital breadcrumbs they left behind. They were arguing more. Their shared social media posts, once a curated display of their perfect love, had become sparse and strained. They were on different pages, their public facade of a united front crumbling under the pressure I had so carefully applied. The climax of this chapter of my plan was a carefully orchestrated email sent from a burner account. It was a single line, sent to both Liam and Sophia, a supposed forward of an email from Liam to a colleague, discussing a new project. But the subject line was the real weapon. "Sophia and I are so excited about this." The email itself was harmless, but the subject was poison. Liam had never used the word "we" in a professional context with Sophia, and she would know it instantly. The email was a fabrication, but to her, it would feel like a betrayal, a reminder of his professional life that she was not a part of. The subtle implication was that he had been lying to her about their professional dynamic all along. The email landed with the force of a grenade. My phone buzzed with an incoming call from Sophia. When I answered, her voice was choked with anger. "Did you see what Liam just did?" she hissed. "He sent an email to his whole team, saying we're working on a project together. He's using my name to look good in front of his investors. He's always been like this, hasn't he? He takes credit for my ideas." I played along, my voice exploit Liam's ambition. I knew his greatest fear was failure, and his greatest weakness was his insatiable need to prove everyone wrong. He was in a frantic search for a new groundbreaking project, a venture so audacious it would silence all the whispers and restore his crumbling reputation. My team, under my anonymous direction, began feeding him leads to a single high-stakes investment opportunity, a fictional tech startup called Elysian Dynamics. The company, in my carefully crafted narrative, was a pioneer in renewable energy technology, a unicorn poised to revolutionize the market. The project was a beautiful, elegant lie. We created an entire digital footprint for Elysian Dynamics, a sleek website with impressive-looking but meaningless graphics, fake LinkedIn profiles for a team of experts, and a series of leaked reports showing a skyrocketing projected valuation. Everything was designed to look incredibly promising while being completely empty. Then, through a series of intermediaries, I had a trusted contact reach out to Liam, offering him a chance to invest in this exclusive opportunity. The offer was too good to be true, and I knew that Liam, blinded by his own ambition, wouldn't be able to resist. The pitch was simple: invest a significant sum now and reap a staggering profit when the company goes public. The timeline was aggressive, designed to prevent him from doing proper due diligence. I watched, holding my breath as Liam took the bait. He didn't just invest his personal savings, he drained his company's last remaining assets. He sold off shares, took out high-interest loans, and even secretly liquidated a few of his more liquid investments, all to pour money into Elysian Dynamics. He was so desperate to prove his worth, to silence his critics, that he was walking straight into the trap I had set. Meanwhile, I had another objective for my team: to sow discord between Liam and Sophia on a new, more personal level. I had them hack into Sophia's private email and send a fake email from her to a friend, detailing her growing frustration with Liam's professional troubles. The email, which I knew would be found by a digital trail I had deliberately left open for Liam to find, complained about his reckless gambling with their now a sitting duck, his future tied to a company that existed only in my spreadsheets. And Sophia, once my best friend, was now living with a man who no longer trusted her, their relationship a hollow shell. They had taken everything from me, and now I was taking it all back. One cruel, calculated move at a time. The night of the grand unveiling arrived. I had rented a lavish ballroom at a downtown hotel, a space shimmering with chandeliers and the clinking of champagne flutes. The invitation, sent under the name of my shell company, Vanguard Enterprises, was a masterstroke of subtlety. It announced a high-profile investors' gala to celebrate a new secret project. The guest list was a mix of the city's most influential business magnates, tech titans, and social elites, the very people whose good opinion Liam and Sophia desperately craved. And, of course, they were at the top of the list. Liam walked in on Sophia's arm, a forced smile plastered on his face. He looked tense, his eyes darting around the room, a man searching for a threat he couldn't see. Sophia, meanwhile, was trying to project an air of effortless grace, but I could see the lines of worry around her eyes, the tension in her jaw. They were a perfect, miserable pair, trapped in a public performance of a love that no longer existed. I moved through the crowd like a ghost, an observer from the shadows. No one recognized me in my new persona, a confident, anonymous businesswoman holding court at the center of a social web. I watched as Liam tried to schmooze with potential investors, his usual charm failing to land. The rumors I had planted had done their work. People were polite but distant. The air around him was thin with suspicion. Suddenly, a hush fell over the room as I took the stage. I was no longer a ghost. I was the ringmaster. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, my voice amplified by the microphone, a note of quiet power in every syllable. "Thank you all for coming tonight. Vanguard Enterprises believes in transparency, in celebrating success, and in exposing fraud." A ripple of confusion went through the crowd. Liam's eyes white. He tried to rush the stage, but a security guard I had hired blocked his path. The crowd murmured, their whispers growing louder as they saw the evidence of his professional deceit. Then, the second part of my plan began. The screen shifted to a new set of images. The first was a series of screenshots of Sophia's and Liam's text messages, revealing their secret affair. The messages, carefully selected from the data I had acquired, weren't overtly sexual. They were intimate, affectionate, and utterly damning. They painted a picture of a long-term, calculated betrayal. My former best friend and my former fiancé, exposed in full view of their peers and friends. A collective gasp went through the room. A few people pulled out their phones, snapping photos. Sophia stood frozen in the middle of the room, her face a mask of mortification. This wasn't just a professional hit. It was a public humiliation. The final piece of the puzzle came from my carefully planted rumors and my fake investment opportunity. The screen showed the details of Liam's investment in Elysian Dynamics. The name of his company, Aegis Innovations, was listed as a primary investor, showing how he had bled his own business dry for a fraudulent scheme. The room erupted in gasps and a furious chatter. I looked at Liam and Sophia, standing there, exposed and humiliated. He was furious, his face a mask of rage and disbelief. She was broken, her pride shattered. They were no longer a couple. They were two people who had destroyed their own lives, and I was just the one holding up the mirror. I stepped away from the microphone, leaving them to face the consequences. The beautiful ballroom, filled with their friends and colleagues, had become a prison of their own making. This wasn't just an act of revenge. It was a masterpiece of cold, calculated fury. And I, the woman who was supposed to be a bride, was its sole author. The silence that followed my pronouncement on stage was the sound of worlds ending. It was a silence so profound it seemed to suck all the air from the room, leaving behind only the cold, sharp truth. Then the silence broke, being shredded in front of the very people they had tried so hard to impress. From my place in the shadows, I watched as their perfect public lives were ripped to shreds. An influential investor from Sterling Holden, who had been sitting at a table with Liam just moments ago, stood up and walked away without a word. Liam's phone began to buzz with calls from his board members, calls I knew were to demand his resignation. For Sophia, the fallout was even more personal. Her own family, friends who had attended the non-wedding, began to step back. A prominent gallery owner who had just agreed to feature her designs shook his head in disgust and made a beeline for the exit. Her professional life, her social standing, the two things she had built her identity on, were crumbling into dust. Liam, defeated and publicly humiliated, stormed out of the gala, leaving a trail of furious whispers in his wake. Sophia, broken and alone, simply stood there, a solitary figure in a room that had once been filled with celebration. The elegant decor, the shining chandeliers, the festive music, it all felt like a cruel joke. I made my way out of the ballroom, slipping past the security I had hired to keep them from following me. I didn't want a confrontation. The revenge was not in a physical fight or a shouting match. It was in the total and utter destruction of their lives, without me even having to raise my voice. The next few days were a blur of delicious news. Liam's company, Aegis Innovations, filed for bankruptcy. His investors and business partners had pulled out, and the exposé from my gala had made it impossible for him to secure a single loan. The financial trap I had set had snapped shut, leaving him with nothing. His reputation was in tatters, a cautionary tale whispered in boardrooms across the city. Sophia's design studio, which had been gaining traction, was hit by a wave of public backlash. Orders were cancelled, and a large retailer dropped her entire line. She was publicly shamed. Phone buzzed with an unknown number. I answered, a quiet sense of anticipation in my chest. "Chloe, it's Sophia." Her voice was a cracked whisper, devoid of its usual airy confidence. "We need to talk. We know you're behind this. Please, just tell us why." The simple question, why, was all the validation I needed. They had connected the dots, a final beautiful piece of my puzzle falling into place. "I don't know what you're talking about, Sophia," I said, my voice as smooth as silk. The lie felt so easy on my tongue. "You both made your own beds. Now you have to lie in them." The line went silent for a moment, then I heard a familiar, enraged roar. "Don't play games, Chloe. It was Liam. We know it was you. You ruined me, my company, my reputation, everything." "You had a perfect company, Liam," I replied, my voice dangerously calm. "I just exposed the rot you had allowed to grow inside of it. You were the one who gambled away your fortune on a fake company. You were the one who ran it into the ground." There was a long silence, 1,000 thoughts rushing through his mind. Then, his voice dropped to a plea. "Chloe, please, let's talk. We can fix this. We can get you everything you want." The audacity of it made me laugh, a sound that was cold and humorless even to my own ears. "You still don't get it, do you? I don't want your money. I don't want a life with either of you. You both destroyed the only things that mattered to me." I let the anger simmer just beneath the surface of my words. "You betrayed me, and I simply gave you the life you deserved." The phone line went dead. They had reached out for mercy, and I had given them none. They had come to me for answers, but all they found was the full measure of my contempt. They had believed they were untouchable, but I, the ghost in the machine, had been pulling the strings all along. The call had sealed it. They now knew who their real enemy was, and with that knowledge would come a desperate final attempt at revenge. They had nothing left to lose, and that made them even more dangerous. But I was ready for them. I had planned for this too. This was the final act, and the curtain was about to rise. A tabloid reporter I had once fed a story to reached out, telling me that Liam and Sophia had come to him with a shocking tell-all about how I, a crazy ex-fiancé, had ruined their lives. I didn't even need to use my PR team. My reputation, my newfound anonymity, was my shield. The reporter, sensing a better story, simply laughed at their accusations and instead published a scathing piece on their pathetic attempt to deflect blame. My final move was to ensure they had nowhere left to go. I had my team leak the details of the financial fraud they had committed with Elysian Dynamics to the SEC. The documents, meticulously prepared by my data analysts, were undeniable. They showed that Liam had embezzled from his own company to invest in a fraudulent scheme, and that Sophia, as a partner, was complicit in the cover-up. The legal repercussions would be swift and severe. The day the news broke, I was sitting in my office, watching the city below. The headline on the screen read, "Disgraced CEO and partner facing federal charges in connection to tech fraud." My phone was silent. There were no calls, no angry texts, no desperate pleas for mercy. They were no longer a threat. They were just two people who had made a series of very bad choices and were now paying the price. I had destroyed their professional lives. I had demolished their public reputation, and I had shattered their relationship. They were no longer Liam and Sophia, the golden couple. They were two criminals facing prison time with nowhere to run and no one to turn to. I had taken away everything they had: their money, their status, their freedom. The finality of it was staggering. It wasn't the fiery climax I had envisioned in my most vengeful fantasies. It was quiet, almost anticlimactic. The war was over, and I had won. But as I sat there, looking out at the city, a cold, empty feeling settled in my stomach. The victory, for all its meticulous planning, felt hollow. The revenge was complete, but the girl I had been, the one who had so eagerly looked forward to a perfect wedding, was gone forever. The victory was mine, complete and devastating. The news of Liam and Sophia's indictment, their faces plastic, cold, empty space. The anger that had fueled me for so long was gone, and without it, I felt adrift. I walked back into the living room, a cavernous space filled with expensive, impersonal furniture. I saw my reflection in the polished glass of a coffee table. It was a stranger's face, the woman I had been, the one who laughed easily, who dreamed of a garden wedding, who loved with a blind and open heart, was gone. In her place was a woman with sharp eyes and a calculating stare. My face was no longer a mirror of my emotions. It was a shield. I picked up my phone, my fingers hovering over the contact for Mark, my data analyst. I could start a new project, another one, keep the machine running. But for what? The joy of the chase, the thrill of the win, it had all faded. The truth was, I had lost. I had won the war, but I had lost myself in the process. My heart, once so full of love, was now a barren wasteland, a victim of its own success. All the power and money in the world couldn't bring back the innocence, the trust, the pure happiness I had lost. I walked into my bedroom, the space that was once to be a sanctuary for my and Liam's future. The closet was still filled with his things, a few shirts, a pair of worn-in jeans. I held one of his shirts, and for the first time since that day, I felt a tremor of emotion. Not anger, not hatred, but a profound, aching sadness. It was the sadness of a life stolen, of a future annihilated not just for them, but for me as well. I had become the very thing I despised, a cold, calculating person, motivated only by revenge. I had spent so long thinking about what I would do to them that I had never considered what I would do after. My life had been defined by a single, destructive purpose, and now that purpose was gone. I knew with a certainty that chilled me to the bone that the most difficult part of my journey wasn't the revenge. It was what came next. It was finding a way to live with the person I had become. A silence in my penthouse, once a symbol of my victory, had become a prison. The vengeful fury, the villain. I was just a woman who had been broken, and now it was time to put the pieces back together. My first act was a simple one. I called Evelyn, my financial advisor, and told her to dissolve Vanguard Enterprises. The company, my weapon, had served its purpose. I then sold the penthouse, the embodiment of my cold, calculated success. The money was just a number. It no longer held any power over me. I decided to leave the city, to find a place where no one knew me, where the ghosts of my past couldn't follow. I settled on a small coastal town in Maine, a place far removed from the high-stakes world of corporate America. I bought a small house by the sea, a place with a garden that needed tending, and a quiet, peaceful rhythm of life. Here, I started to rediscover myself piece by piece. I spent my days planting flowers, painting, and simply walking along the beach. I stopped checking the news about Liam and Sophia. Their fate was in the hands of the law, and it was no longer my concern. My focus was on healing, on learning to trust again, not others, but myself. The process was slow and painful. I had to learn to live with the knowledge of what I was capable of, both the love and the ruthless coldness. But as the seasons changed, I started to feel something new. It wasn't the joyous, naive happiness of my past. It was a quieter, more resilient kind of peace. It was the peace of a survivor, of a woman who had walked through fire and emerged, not unscathed, but whole, in a new and stronger way. My old life was a a story I would never tell. My revenge was a closed book, and I, Chloe, was no longer a victim or a villain. I was just a woman standing on the shore, ready to face the quiet, beautiful uncertainty of a new beginning. My heart was no longer an empty void. It was a canvas, scarred and weathered, but ready for a new story to be painted upon it.